Hello and welcome to today's stream. Today we're going to be talking about one of the new sets that they have introduced to City of Heroes Homecoming. A couple days ago they opened up the new classes, or the new sets, Psionic Armor and the control set, Psionic, Pyrotechnic Control. So these are new. These are not live yet, though. We're just going to be looking at the beta version of these sets. But today we're going to be focusing just on the armor set, Psionic Armor. So wanted to give my first impressions of the build, talk about how the powers are going to be working, and just what I think about how the build is going to perform overall in City of Heroes. So I'm going to be looking at the tanker version of Psionic Armor for most of the video. I'll be going through how each of these powers work, after I do that, I will go back and we'll look at the differences for Scrapper, Stalker, Sentinel, and Brute. So, and that is all of the classes that can use Psionic Armor, I believe. It's just all of them classes that have armor sets. So Tanker, Stalker, Sentinel, Scrapper, and Brute. Yep. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the tanker version of Psionic Armor. So, the set overall, I think this is going to be an amazing set. I have not gotten the chance to test this, but just looking at the numbers and the descriptions of the powers, I think this is going to be a really amazing set, really fun set. I really like what they have done. There are some things about it that are new mechanics, such as the adaptive recharge that we'll talk about. So I will be comparing it to sets that already exist, just so you can see. I think there's a lot of similarities between this and Invulnerability, but we can also look at some of the regen components and how that compares to other sets in the game. Yeah, so let's just get right into it. First of all, I just want to go through each of the powers and talk a little bit about them. So first power you get, you will pretty much always take the first 4 abilities in Psionic Armor. First one is Psychic Wall. This is just your typical toggle, giving you smashing, lethal, and this one is giving psionic resistance. So the numbers are really great. It's interesting to see that you have more smashing than lethal protection. It definitely makes sense from a roleplay perspective, but that is just pretty uncommon that smashing and lethal have separate resistances or defenses. Well, defenses is more common, but for resistance, I can only think maybe like energy does this. Let's see, does energy have different? Smashing, lethal, no. Most of the time they're the same, where you'd have smashing and lethal the exact same, but just something, not a really big deal, but you do have 10% less lethal. Obviously, Psionic Armor, you're going to have a ton of psionic resistance. So, yeah, 30% psionic right off the bat with your first power, pretty great. Psionic Shield, our second power, this is another toggle you're pretty much always going to take. This is rounding out the resistances, giving you fire, cold, energy negative, and more psionic damage. Okay, these 3 powers right here, and then the third one is in Penetrating Mind. These are the only 3 that give resistance. So in Penetrating Mind gives resistance. It also gives the status protection, which is pretty standard. One thing to note that is nice is that you also have the Terrorize protection, whereas Invulnerability, Unyielding has the same CC protection, but you'll notice no Terrorize protection. So that is just kind of nice that Psionic does have that as well. However, we can already identify the first weakness of Psionic Armor just looking at these. These are the only resistance powers that you get for Psionic. They give you all 3 right away, and you will notice that there is no toxic protection for Psionic. So toxic and Psionic as element damage are the least common, right? Smashing and lethal is most common. Then usually fire, I mean fire is really common. Cold as well is more common than not. And then it starts to get more rare with energy and negative energy, especially negative energy. And then you have toxic and psionic being the least common. That being said, as I'm thinking about this, there are, like in Vulnerability, for example, your weakness is psionic. With Psionic, your weakness is Toxic. Which one is better than the other? I feel like there's more Psionic damage in the game than Toxic. Both have enemy types that do exclusively that type of damage. So if you think about like Seers, they do exclusively Psionic damage. Or if you think about like Hydra, they do exclusively Toxic damage. So when you're fighting those enemy types, it can be very brutal. Invulnerability fighting all Seers is really difficult. And then it would be the same for Psionic, but you're dealing with Toxic damage. So Hydra are going to be really difficult for a Psionic armor tank to fight. There are some things that you can combat this with, though, so which we'll get to powers later. But that is just something to note. You're going to want to be doing a lot to increase your Toxic damage through sets, because you have no Toxic damage resistance built into the build whatsoever. So if you didn't accommodate for that at all in your build, a Psionic armor tank would have literally 0% resistance to Toxic, which is pretty crazy. But other than that, the resistances are pretty crazy. Psionic wise, just without sets or enhancements, you're looking at 47% resistance to Psionic. I mean, you're going to be capped, no problem. Psionic is going to do nothing to you. And Smashing and Lethal being pretty solid. Lethal a little bit less so. But then if you look at like these numbers here, so 20% resistance fire and cold. I believe that's on par with invulnerability. So resist elements, you only get 10%, but then you get another 10% with unyielding. So that's the same. So the same amount of resistance for fire and cold, but then you have 30% energy and negative in Psionic, whereas invulnerability only has 20%. So you actually have better resistance numbers off the bat than even invulnerability does. Invulnerability does have the additional 10% smashing lethal. So is it only 10%? Oh no, it's actually, you have an extra 15%. So that is pretty significant. But like smashing and lethal, I'm sure you're going to be able to get capped outside of that 15% with tough. So not a big deal, but already just looking at these first three powers, it's feeling like the resistances are on par, or if not even better than invulnerability, and especially once you account for sets. So looking pretty good already. We've only done the first three powers. Now Consume Psyche is the first pretty new power that you have in the set. There are a couple things that are unique about this particular armor set, and this is the first one. So Consume Psyche is basically a cooldown button that you'll use. It has something called Adaptive Recharge, which is brand new to the game. They're introducing with this set. It has it in the notes section here, but it just says this power has Adaptive Recharge. It has a base recharge of 5 seconds, and each affected foe will increase the recharge by 5.5 seconds for a maximum total of 60 seconds. So this is a really cool mechanic. I think it really makes this power workable, and it also makes it so it's not so punishing if you misuse it. If there was an adaptive recharge, for example, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, so the way this power works is you want it to hit as many targets as possible. It has a 10 target hit cap, but it basically gives you more regeneration and recovery based on the enemy's hit. So if you hit 10 targets, you're getting a ton of regeneration. I mean, it would be like over 350% regen. So that's really solid, and that's like better than like basic stuff you'd get from regeneration. I mean, if you think about like fast healing is giving 75%. It's pretty significant amount of regeneration we're talking about here. So let's say you use this ability, there's a big juicy mob up ahead, you go up to use it. It has a 1.3 activation time, and right before it goes off, a blaster nukes the mob and kills everything and only leaves like 1 or 2 targets. You were planning to hit 10, but you only hit 2 because the mob died so quick. That would be really punishing if the cooldown of this power was fixed, because, you know, it would have like a 60-second recharge. Since it's adaptive and you only hit 2 targets, you do get a significantly reduced buff, but the cooldown is like minimal, so you can just use it again within the next couple seconds. So that's a really great mechanic that they've incorporated. It also makes it more forgiving when you're fighting like AVs. The only thing that is I mean, it's balance that they did this, but it definitely limits how creatively you can use this ability. Is it says in the text here, hitting any foe with this power will refresh all existing stacks you currently have, which makes sense. So it's not like worth spamming on one target. You just need to have it use it every 45 seconds. So if you're fighting like an AV or a giant monster or something where you're just fighting one enemy for an extended period of time, maybe you're doing an incarnate trial and you're just fighting one boss for a long time, you just have to use this ability once every 45 seconds to benefit from the regen and recovery that you get. Although it will be coming out, it will be coming off recharge constantly, right? Because if it is a base recharge of 5 seconds after regeneration boosts a recharge boost or bonus and enhancements, you're talking like that's like a 2-second recharge. So you can use this every 2 seconds. You only need to use it every 45 seconds with one target. So that's an important thing to note. Basically, you always want this buff up, but the way you're going to use it is you want to try to hit as many targets as you can. It's always better to hit 10 instead of, 7. But you pretty much always want to have it up. So sometimes you may have to use it on less than 10 if that's what you have to do. The other thing that's not specified in how this power works, and this is something that would just take testing to figure out, and it could be a very interesting use of this ability, is it does have a regeneration rate debuff built into it. So if you're fighting an AV, for example, and like I said, with all of the recharge that you would get and the adaptive recharge, it's coming back every 2 seconds. That means you can weave this in between attacks. You attack, you use Consume Psyche, you attack, you use Consume Psyche, and you just keep spamming this ability on the AV. Does the regeneration debuff stack for the 45 seconds? Because if it does, this could be worth it to do in certain situations, maybe, because 100% regeneration rate for 45 seconds, is it worth it? If there's nothing else for you to be doing, it could be, because you can get that up to, maybe like 900% if you stack it up 9 times. So, and that's permanent regeneration rate as long as you keep using it. Pretty good. So that could be something to note for this. That's just something that has to be tested in order to find out. But the way that regen works is a regen is amazing. Regeneration is incredible because it lets you sustain forever, right? You don't need healing. You could just keep regenning your stuff back. But the flaw with regeneration, and they just added the regeneration tank, the flaw is you can get alpha striked, or you can just take a spike damage and get killed, get one shot, and it there's nothing you can do about it, because if you're dead, you're not regenerating anymore. So the thing about regeneration is, in order for it to really get its effect of keeping you alive, is you have to have resistances and defenses to work with it. So that's kind of how they balance it out. The regeneration tree you get all this regeneration, which is amazing, but you only get, where is it? Integration? Resilience. You only get 12% resist to all damage. So that's why it's balanced. The thing about Psionic armor is you get all this regen if you're using Consume Psyche well, and you have the resistance, and you have the defense. It's like all encompassing. So I don't know. I mean, it looks really strong on paper to have an ability like this in addition to all the other resistances and defenses that you have. I think that it almost looks a little bit too overpowered, which I love. I love that. So really great power. This is kind of I would say, one of the main defining powers of psionic armor on a tank is Consume Psyche. One thing that I will say, there's a couple powers in here that are more effective the more enemies that are around you. So besides one of the weaknesses of psionic armor being toxic, I'd say the other weakness that you have of psionic armor is when you are fighting one target at a time. Because if you're only fighting one target, Consume Psyche you're not really getting much mileage from. I mean, we're talking about a difference of like 200% regeneration, it being like more than 4 times more effective when you're fighting multiple targets. So that is something to consider. Psionic armor, I think, is going to struggle a little bit more when you're fighting like solo bosses, as opposed to, fighting lots and lots of enemies at once. Okay, next one we have is Impose Presence, and this is the other ability that scales based on the amount of targets around you. So this is pretty similar to Willpower. If you're familiar with Rise to the Challenge, it works the same way, where the more enemies you have around you, the more buffs you are getting. And the buffs that you are getting from Impose Presence are crazy powerful. Starting off, you get a 2% to hit bonus per enemy around you. So with 10 targets max, that's giving you 10% to hit, which is just awesome to have. It also does do a little bit of a debuff to their recharge rate. Not that significant, but just a little extra something. And the most significant part of this is you are getting, it's only 0.75 per target, but if that's 10 targets, you're getting 7.5% range and melee defense. That is extreme. That is a lot. So the difference between that and 0.75 when you're fighting one target is so big. So basically, when you're fighting a lot of targets, you're going to be really hard to hit with defense, because Impose Presence is not the only defense power that you're getting. So when it stacks with everything else, it is quite significant. 12-foot radius is not too big on the power, but this is going to be an amazing ability and also a must-have. It also does have a taunt component to it, which is obviously great for tanks. So so far we have like heavy resistances, we're getting regen, we have some defense now, and then we get this next one, Psychokinetic Barrier. Yeah. This is a cooldown ability. You have a 1-minute recharge on this one. There is no adaptive recharge or anything like that. 0.73 activation time is excellent. These, oh wait, is that where I went? Oh no, 1.17. And it's like a little bit, it's about average, exactly average. I'd say if it was like 1 second, that would be pretty good, but 1.17 second, pretty average ability. I think that's shorter than Dull Pain. Dull Pain is even shorter. Okay, so it's gonna stop you for a second, a little bit more than a second. But this ability is incredible. This is a perfect ability to have on this set. What it does is it gives you an absorb, and it also gives you a little bit more regen, and it gives you some resistances here to endurance and regeneration. Oh, and recharge. But the reason why this ability is so strong is to have a cooldown ability that gives you an absorb on a tank that has regen. This is amazing, because imagine you're fighting on your tank, you got to like half health or like a quarter health or even less. You're regenning like crazy from Consume Psyche, because you gotten all the stacks of that. But the absorb allows you to continue to regen your health, because instead of damage taking away from your health, it's taking away from the absorb. So it just works really well with builds that have regen built in. It also is giving you more regen when you do it. So this is just an excellent ability. This is for example, this is so much better than regen having the reconstruction ability, which is just a heal. You don't want to heal on a AT or a set that has lots of regen, because you already regenning. You don't need a heal. And absorb, on the other hand, is perfect because it allows your regen to do its thing while preventing incoming damage via the absorb. So this is like the perfect ability to have on in this set. Yeah, really great. And also resistance to endurance and recovery rate, I think, is underrated for tankers, because I mean it's just as important as your health bar. If you run out of endurance, you lose all your toggles, you get held, and you're just going to die very quickly. So a lot of tanks like invulnerability, which I keep comparing it to, and the reason why I'm comparing it to invulnerability as well is because, in my opinion, invulnerability is one of the best tank sets in the game. So just the fact that I can compare it to invulnerability, and that some aspects of it are even better than invulnerability, just speaks a lot to how great psionic armor is going to be. So yeah, invulnerability does not have any way to deal with endurance. You do have a little bit of endurance resistance, but you don't have any ability that like gives you recovery or just like gives you endurance outright. Psychic armor, you get consume psyche, which is going to be giving you recovery, and you're also getting some recovery resistance. Is that I think that's the only way you're getting it, is through this ability. Excuse me. But yeah, so if you're fighting like Malta Sappers, or if you're fighting Lord Recluse, this is just extremely important to include in a set. It really rounds out the set. So really nice. Okay, precognition is the final like defense ability, I believe, in the set. Or well, it's literally defense, but I meant like protection. It's keeping you alive. So precognition is an incredible defense ability. It's giving you 5% defense to all positionals, range, melee, and AoE. And it's also giving you some psionic defense, which is completely worthless, but whatever. It's also giving you resistance to perception radius and increasing your perception radius, which is excellent. So you're not going to be smoke bombed or anything like that. You don't have to pick up tactics for this build. It's built into the set. So there's a lot of like things that you have to consider with other sets, like fire aura, you don't really have any defense, so like that's the hole. Or invulnerability, you don't have the terrorize protection, but psionic armor, it like has all the status protection, it has healthy resistances, it has healthy defense, it has regeneration and recovery. It's kind of covering all the bases really well. So this ability, if you take weave as well, is going to be excellent. And so weave, precognition, and impose presence, these are your 3 defense abilities, so you definitely want to take them. They're all leaning into positional defenses, which is a lot easier to build for. It's just really, really great. It's also an auto power, so it's always on. It's going to be really healthy in the defense department. I think it's going to be pretty easy to get it capped. Certainly for melee defense, that's going to be well over cap. AoE defense is going to be a little bit weaker on this build, especially when you're fighting multiple targets, because impose presence does not give AoE defense, which is too bad, but there's easy ways to get that through sets, so it's okay. Yeah, so I mean, just looking at this, these are all like the protection powers. They are really well rounded. I think it's excellent what they've done. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some nerfs, and I haven't even played the set yet, but it just seems like so well rounded that it can just kind of do everything. And then we have the last 2 powers, which are also really interesting in what they do. I think when I read about this in the patch notes, they were really Aura of Insanity, this next power, was something that they were really focusing on as like this cool new thing. I think what I think is cool about it is not necessarily the power itself, but how it works with enhancements. But anyways, let's talk about it. So this is an aura that a toggle that is an AoE around you, 12-foot radius, which is okay. It does not cost endurance. It costs health. And what it's doing is it is randomly choosing I think it's random. Maybe it's cycled, but from what I can tell, it seems like it's a random occurrence of some type of CC on the target. So it cycles through either confusing the target, stunning, sleeping, holding, or terrorizing. And whatever CC the target gets affected with will also have a corresponding debuff associated with it. So if your target is stunned by Aura of Insanity, then they will also have their regeneration rate debuffed. And then for sleep, it's resistance. For holds, it's defense. And then for terrorize, it is to hit. Of these four, honestly, I feel like the terrorize one is the best. 7% to hit is more meaningful than definitely than defense debuff and regeneration rate. The second best one would probably be the resistance debuff. Pretty nice. But 7% to hit is pretty substantial, and so that's pretty nice. Oh, it also does do damage to the target if they're not affected with the control effects, which a lot of targets will not be, like bosses or AVs. 4 ticks of 2.64 psionic damage over 3 seconds is like terrible. It barely does any damage at all. Okay, so that's pretty much how the CC works. Unfortunately, the magnitude is a little bit too low. 2.5 is not great. You need, like, I think 3 is what you're going to want for, like, everything except for bosses will be CC'd with a 3 magnitude. For bosses, I think you need at least a 4 magnitude for most bosses, unless they're particularly resistant or protected from that CC. So what that means is this is not going to be affecting bosses ever unless you put an enhancement in there. So it has a little note at the bottom of the ability, which is hard to read on my screen because I see it's cut off halfway. There's nothing I can do about that. So it says, notes, Mez enhancements on this power enhance its magnitude instead of its duration. So on every power in City of Heroes that takes a hold enhancement, what that does is it's increasing the duration that hold works. So, you know, it'll be like, let's say a 3 magnitude hold for 30 seconds. If you put an enhancement in it, it's still a 3 magnitude hold, but it lasts for, 40 or 50 seconds, let's say. This power works the other way, where when you put a Mez enhancement in the power, it increases the magnitude, which is crazy and, like, very significant. So since there's so many types of CC that are included here, it seems like the obvious no-brainer thing to do set-wise is to use Hamadon enhancements, because a Hamadon enhancement that says it increases Mez will increase all of these. So if you put in like 3 hammies in here, I mean, you'd be, I don't know what the magnitude gets up to. This is something that has to be tested. It's pretty clear here, since they are listing these twice, like 2-point magnitude confuse and then a 0.5 magnitude confuse. Like, why wouldn't they just put, oh, it's just a 2.5 magnitude? Because I'm sure that one of these is affected by enhancements and one of them is not. I don't know which one is which. If the 2 magnitude confuse is affected, which I would be surprised, because that would mean you could get the magnitude up a lot, versus the other way, if this one is. I don't know which way it works. But I would just be putting Hamadon enhancements in Aura of Insanity. You don't really need to put damage in there unless you want to put a proc, but there's no point because that wouldn't be good. So yeah, I'd pretty much just want to put like some Mez enhancements if you use it. On a tank, I don't know. I'd have to test it to know if this is actually worth taking, because it does damage you. That is a pretty big drawback for a tank. However, if it works well, the CC that you're getting from this ability, I'm sure that you would save health, like spending health to keep them CC'd rather than the damage they would do to you, probably. That's how you would have to determine whether or not it's worth it. Are you actually losing health by using this ability, or is it protecting you by keeping the enemy CC'd? So that's just something you'd have to test. And then our last ability, the tier 9, this is a really cool one. This is another one that uses the adaptive recharge, and it's really good that it does. So this is very similar to Soul Transfer for Dark Armor. I'll explain why. It is a little bit better than that, I think, because you don't have to have a target. No, it's a self spell. So it is an AoE of 25 feet. That is really great. A really big AoE around you. It will heal you. No. Let's double check. It gives you max. Yeah, it heals you and it gives you max hit points based on how many enemies are hit. 10 targets being the maximum amount of people that can be hit. So that is 740 hit points. Maximum hit points. Let's compare that to Dull Pain. Dull Pain is a little bit better. Oh wait, no, they're like the exact same. But that is only if you hit all 10 targets. If you don't, it's not as good. But just the fact that it can be on par with Dull Pain, like that's pretty amazing. It also terrorizes everyone around you. It's only a 3 magnitude terrorize, but it's, just something. I mean, I think terrorize is a great form of CC. So that's nice. It is also a resurrect. So if you use this when you're dead, instead of what it typically does, it will give you, so it'll give you a little bit of health back, a little bit of a heal, and then it does a 30 magnitude terrorize. There is only one other ability that has anything even close to this magnitude, and that is Soul Transfer. So if you're familiar with that ability, similar to how when you use this and it hits anybody, they're going to be stunned. The same is can be said about the Psionic Armor version. Everything will be terrorized. Anything this hits will be terrorized, which is cool. So just a really nice flexible ability. And then it does have that adaptive recharge. So if you use it on only one target, it has a base recharge of 10 seconds. So really forgiving in how this set works. So yeah, I think overall it's going to be an amazing set. I think it has all your bases covered, just really solid. As far as what it's going to pair well for, and I'm just talking about the tank side exclusively, it's hard because they did just change how the secondaries are working. So I don't want to like too strongly recommend something. I'll just give a couple things you might want to consider. So the big one is Psionic Armor's strength is fighting multiple targets. Its weakness is fighting, single targets. So that is what I would consider most about your secondary. Do you want to lean into sets that do a lot of AoE damage, and then that would make you like an AoE specialist, or do you want to be like more single target focused with your secondary to kind of like round yourself out more? If you want to go AoE focused, look no farther than Radiation Melee. This is pretty much the best AoE set in the game with Atom Smasher and Irradiated Ground. You're going to be doing plenty of AoE damage. It does have a little bit of a defense debuff, but that's pretty much meaningless unless you are like a level 50 and you have a bunch of like low level tunes on your team. So really it's just damage. You do a ton of damage, lots of AoE damage. Single target is not as strong as other sets, but on top of all the abilities you have, it should also say hitting contaminated targets. So whenever you hit targets, they have a chance to be contaminated, and then if you hit one of those contaminated targets with a single target attack, a portion of that power's damage will also hit nearby foes. So it just like spreads how much damage you're doing. So it's just like an AoE focus build. It does so much AoE damage. So that's probably what I would choose if you want to. That would be like a psionic armor and radiation melee tank is like a mob specialist. You do so well at fighting multiple targets at once. Katana and broadsword, probably not needed actually. A lot of times they're interesting to pick because they both get an ability like this parry. We're looking at broadsword, and then for katana it's called divine avalanche. You get 15% strength in melee defense. I mean, it's a really cool ability for like survival. It just makes you like really tanky. But I don't know if it's worth it because I don't think you're going to need the extra melee defense. So you probably would stay away from that. For a single target and just like all around, it's hard to beat dark melee. This is probably the best tanker set, although I have to test this because it has been extremely nerfed. I don't know if this is a glitch or not, but the numbers are really low. These used to be really high. I don't know, like I want to say like 7 or 8% to hit. They're now nerfed to like even worse than what scrappers have. But yeah, dark melee is typically just so strong because it does decent damage and you are debuffing the targets with minus to hit. So overall it's really good. You also got soul drain, which is going to help you do more damage. Dark consumption, an extra ability you can use to get endurance back. If you want to go the extra tanky route, you can take siphon life as a little heal. Most of the time you won't do that, but it's an option. And then other than that, it's just kind of like whatever you want to take. Those are just like the main ones that stand out. It's also hard because, like I said, they did really just change how the tank secondaries are going to work. So hard to recommend at this time until I do some more testing myself. Okay, so that kind of covers like psionic armor for the most part. I do want to briefly touch on how it works with the other sets. So brute should be the exact same as tank, so I don't need to cover that. Let's just double check. Yep, that's the exact same. However, scrapper, sentinel, and stalker are a little bit different. So scrapper is better than a stalker. So I would never really recommend a stalker. There's only a couple like specific builds that maybe are better on a stalker, but most of the time you want to pick a scrapper. They just do more damage. And psionic armor is one of those sets that you especially want to pick a scrapper over a stalker based on what I've seen. So the way that it works is they're replacing I can't remember what it's called, so let's just double check. Psionic armor on a tank, you get imposed presence. This is that ability that gives you stacking to hit and defense based on how many enemies are around you. They removed that from scrappers and they replaced it with a stealth ability. So you now have mask presence. Mask presence is a typical stealth ability. It gives you extra defense outside of combat, and when you're in combat, it still gives you a healthy 3.75%, which is nice. It's about half as much as imposing presence is for the tank, but this works even when you have one target. So it's actually, it's hard to say. It's a little bit more applicable to all situations, right? Mask presence is giving you defense even when there's one target. Imposing presence, which is the tank version, gives you much more defense only when there's multiple targets. You also get a nice little 50% strength to all damage. This only works when you are in stealth, like outside of combat. So you get like a nice little big opener, similar to how stalkers work, which is why this is not as good on a stalker, because stalkers already have that built in. So it's not really I don't think it has that effect because stalkers already have that to begin with. So on a scrapper, psionic armor with mask presence, it would be really good to have something like energy, because you get total focus and that could be your opener. It does 50% increased damage. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I could see that being nerfed because that's pretty powerful. It is only for the opener though, so not like game changing. One of the big issues with all of the other sets is instead of the AoE around you, it's not called Devour Psyche, it's called something else, but this regen ability, they turn it into a cone, which is just awful. So you're gonna have to make it work as a cone now if you're doing it on anything but a tank. But other than that, the amount that it is affecting you is equal to the tank version. So as long as you can hit the targets, it's still really potent. Overall, I mean, I think it would be great on any set, and I think the Sentinel doesn't really have any changes to it either. It's the same. Yep, Mass Presence, Devour Psyche. So yeah, overall, I think it's going to be a really awesome set. I can't wait to try it out. I'm going to be probably trying it on a tank. I'm thinking I'll do like a Psionic armor. I don't know what I'll do for the secondary. I'll have to do some testing before I make a decision on that. But yeah, I really like what the Homecoming team did. I think they made a really wonderful set that's kind of different with the Adaptive Recharge, and just like the Aura of Insanity being so different. The Absorb, that's pretty unique, and just it being so well-rounded. I think they made a really wonderful set here. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching.